What's going on, everybody? This is your uncle. This is your brother, Yafri J. Just stopping by on this wonderful Friday afternoon just to give you some words of inspiration and also to give you a little bit of hope in the time that we're in. What time is it that we're in? Well, we all know that we are coming up on a very historical election. This election is one of the greatest elections that we will ever have in this country. And it is at the same time a great divide in our country. And I'm hearing many people talk about, what's going on or what they see going on or what they think is going to happen or what might not happen. And I can't really speculate on any of those things, but I can tell you this, as far as seeing what's going on spiritually, I want to just weigh in and just give my little 2 cents on that, if it's okay with you guys. Listen, the fight that America is in right now, up until November 5th, is a fight between the spirit and the ego. That's right, I said it, between the spirit and the ego. One thing I love about the spirit of God and the spirit of the Most High God is that it is a perfect spirit. It is a spirit that is joyful, spirit of peace, spirit of love, spirit of gentleness, faithfulness, all of those things. It is eternal, meaning that eternal just doesn't mean that it's eternal out there. Eternal also means unchanging, doesn't change. And that's what the spirit of the Most High God is. It's a spirit of God that doesn't change. Why doesn't it change? Because it's perfect. When something is perfect, it doesn't need to be altered. And so the Spirit of God, what it does is, and it's so powerful, what it does is it extends, it increases, and it integrates. Let me say that again. It extends, it increases, and it integrates. What do I mean by that? The Spirit of God follows the same creation story as God made Adam, and after he made Adam, all the things that he did, it was an extension of himself. That's all it was. He made him in our own image and likeness. So he extended himself through Adam and man to make the extension. After the extension, he increased. After the increase, he what? Integrated. It went further out. Other people got involved with it. And so that's what the Spirit does. The Spirit is true. The Spirit is eternal. The Spirit of God doesn't need anybody to work on it, doesn't need anybody to clean it up, doesn't need anybody to say, well, we need to tell her this or we need to do that. It doesn't need any of those things. The Spirit of God is perfect within itself. Well, what is it that's going on the other side of the Spirit of God? It's called the ego. And what is the ego? The ego is very simple. I've heard a lot of definitions, but this is my definition, okay, from Dr. Jasper. But the ego is nothing but a built-in deception that came along with your birth. It came along with the awareness and the when you awaken in this earth as a child, or we came, of course, as a child, we came into this earth and the doctor slapped us on our little behinds and we began to cry. As we began to grow, ego was right there. Ego is the same age that you are right now. Ego is that part of us that is deception in us. It is the part of us that does not want any part of the Spirit of God. I'm going to say that again. Ego is the built-in deception that is a part of us that wants nothing to do with the Spirit of God. It is amazing. The Spirit doesn't even acknowledge the ego, but yet the ego is always trying to captivate on something that the Spirit is doing. So right now in America, that's where we're at. We're in the fight and the war between spirit and ego. And here's the crazy thing about it is, and I want you to hear this good. Ego it's just sick. Ego is delusional. Ego is undesirable. And ego is totally, totally insane. That's why you have to understand change is so hard for the ego. Why is that? Because the ego is not only a built-in deception, but the ego has always been, will always be the separator. It always comes to separate from the whole. It always comes to separate. That's the whole job of that built-in deception. It comes to separate from the whole. And this is why, and I'm going to talk about this another time, this is why the atonement of Christ, when taught the correct way, you have to understand the ego and the spirit to understand the atonement of Christ. Because if you don't understand the atonement of Christ with the ego and the spirit, you really don't get what Christ did and how he bridged that gap and how your mind is supposed to think correctly. But we'll get back to that in another time. The thing about the ego is that the ego cannot take change. It does not like change. The ego does not like change because change is a way to heal separation. I'm going to say that again. Ego does not like change because change is a way to heal separation and bring things together. But the ego doesn't want to do that. The ego totally doesn't want to change because the ego does not believe in coming together. It's a separate entity with its own rules, its own regulations, its own processes of thought. So, with that said, if the ego does not want to change, and if the ego does not want to be healed through change, why is that? Because the first change in any part of the ego that happens first is where the ego lands at. What do I mean by that? The first major change in America was the change of making whiteness something that was on the same level as God or divine. And with that, it separated itself from those other human beings who are just like it. 5 fingers, 5 toes, great brain, blood running through the body, the whole nine. But what the ego has done is separated itself from the herd. And in that separation, racism and supremacy, did you hear what I said? Racism and supremacy is what was birthed out of it. That's what was birthed out of ego. Racism and supremacy. None of these things were created by God. They were all man-made because, watch what I'm getting ready to say, right? Ego has to have an avatar to work out the deception. That's all ego needs is a body. And that body will work out the deception, any form and any way that ego wants to do. Well, that's where we are in America right now, where we see racism on the rise like we've never seen. We're hearing all this crazy talk again, like it used to be in the 60s when I grew up, and the different times in the 70s in different spaces. We're beginning to see that again. Why? Because the ego is totally delusional and is totally insane. The other thing about the ego is this. It wants nothing to do with the spirit. It wants nothing to do with joy, peace, love. It doesn't want anything to do with any of those things. The ego and the spirit are diametrically opposed. Watch what I'm going to say. Diametrically opposed in source, in direction, and in outcome. I'm going to say that again. The spirit and the ego are diametrically opposed to each other in source, in direction, and in outcome. It always goes another way with the ego because the ego never wants to be a part of the greater group. So that's what's going on in America right now. That's what's going on between the spirit and the ego. America wants joy again. America is tired of the heaviness of the ego. One of the things that the ego does, it makes you fatigue. It makes you tired. That's why the word for world means tired. When you understand the word for world, it really means to be tired, to be drained, to be fatigued. Well, the ego is the same thing. The ego means to be fatigued. And that's where America is right now. She's fatigued. She's tired. Because this rush of division that has come along through the avatars of the ego has now put America in a place of jeopardy. And so on November 5th, we have to go and make the difference to make sure that that doesn't happen. Listen, walk in the Spirit. The Spirit of God is always complete. The Spirit of God is always perfect. Joy is perfect. Love is perfect. Peace is perfect. All of these things are perfect. And watch this. It's a tragedy to the ego. Do you know when you walk in peace, it's treacherous to the ego? Did you realize that? Anytime you have peace in your body and your spirit, it's treacherous to the ego and it doesn't like it. So the ego has enemies, and the enemies of the ego are the fruits of the spirit, are the joy of the spirit. It is the spirit itself. So you say, well, Doc, what do I do? Raise your spirits. Raise your spirits up. Keep your joy going. Don't let anybody take that love from you. Don't let people come across and talk you out of your love and your gentleness and your kindness. Don't let anybody talk you out of that, because that is how the spirit works. And in America right now, we need more love. We need more joy. We absolutely need more peace. And I believe we're coming into that place. Even though there's some things prophetically that has to happen, and we know that because there's still some open prophecies from the Bible that the Most High has to fill out and work out through us, but he's doing that. But the thing about it is that in this time that we're in, stay in the spirit. Don't let the ego drag you over. The ego is delirious. Let me say this. The ego is so crazy that it can't even have vision. It can only have, vision comes from the spirit. But for the ego can't have vision. It can only have fantasies. That's all. Spirit has vision. Egos have fantasies. And what the ego does is the ego takes twisted realities and try to make it real and try to bring it forth as a vision. But the whole time it's just a twisted perception or reality or unreality. You can use either or. That's what the ego does. So make sure you stay away from, all of those things that are egotistical. Remember now, watch what I'm getting ready to say. Listen to Doc, listen to what he's getting ready to say. That's why humility is a lesson for the ego. I'm going to say that again. That's why humility is a lesson for the ego. Humility, it has nothing to do with the spirit realm. Nothing. Humility only comes to teach a lesson to the ego. To allow the ego to know you're not the strongest part of this whole. There's something stronger. There's something stronger. So what I want to say to you guys, stay in the spirit. Go out and vote. Make your stand, because this is the privilege that we've been given here in America, to make that stand, that we can go out and vote. Go out and vote. Make your stand. But whatever you do, stay away from the ego. It's delusional. It's crazy. It's in opposition to everything that is good and everything that God wants to do. Stay away from it. Guys, take care. Enjoy yourself. Have a great weekend.